It is 11 days to go, and I'm thrilled today to be joined again by Tara Palmieri of Puck News, who is one of the very best political reporters in America, has a real handle not just on what's going on in the race, but the people in the country that will decide the race, which is often an ingredient missing in the mix with a lot of the political coverage. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you, Steve, for that kind intro. It's such a pleasure to be on the show. Really honored.
I was about 30 seconds late dialing in on our set time because I got a call from a freaked out Democrat
Oh,
consultant, very well known in the party, and bereft, saying she's going to lose. The mood was despair,
mhm,
hopelessness, depression, a little bit of anger and bewilderment about what she should be doing, could be doing, talking about the Nevada early vote numbers are terrible, real
mm.
rage towards Biden, that I
Yeah.
think is that's just bubbling underneath there. But my first question for you, like, is he an outlier? Like, what's the mood as you're talking to people? Like, what team thinks they're winning? What team thinks they're losing? Who's happy? Who's sad? What's going on the campaign trail with these campaigns?
Okay, I'll cut to the chase. Democrats definitely are anxious. They feel like they're losing. Republicans are feeling amazing. Perhaps it's misguided, but they're really encouraged by these early voting figures. Republicans are coming out in stronger numbers than ever before, for a variety of reasons. Republicans traditionally never voted early, except for in Arizona, right? And it was always Democrats. I'm talking about the battleground states. But now, there's vote by mail. There's early voting in these battleground states that some of them started back in COVID in 2020 or just in the recent election. And, Trump called it rigged. He called it, fraudulent. But the new messaging from the GOP and from himself, a convert, is that vote by mail. I'm going to do it. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene is voting early and by mail. So, you know, the party has shifted towards vote by mail, vote by mail, vote by mail. And this is something we've never seen before. Republicans voting early. And in the case of North Carolina yesterday, they outvoted Democrats by 3,000 votes. That's never happened before. And in fact, like that's always been a strength for Democrats, specifically in North Carolina, is getting their voters out early. So there's obviously a lot of anxiety about these early voting numbers. And I think it's translating to both parties, just because, and the Republicans are super happy. But you know what? These voters, they may have gone out on election day and instead they're just banking their vote now. And maybe they're just cannibalizing the people that were going to show up anyway. And on election day, when Republicans tend to get more voters, they may not see that. So this glee could be misguided. But I know that, the RNC co-chair, Michael Whatley, is telling all the supporters, like, we're getting these great figures. We feel so good about Pennsylvania. Democrats still haven't reached 500,000 early vote requests yet. That's what they sort of need to counter on election day. And so, Republicans, so they always beat their chest. Like it's kind of part of the psychology of the party. And perhaps it's because they realize that their voters don't like going out unless they think they're voting for a winning team. And Democrats induce anxiety to get their voters out. I mean, you can see it in Harris's messaging, right? It's like, if you don't vote for me, it's an existential threat to democracy. Trump's a fascist. He's a dictator. Think of how dark it can be. I just had one of Harris's advisors on my show, John Anzalone, and he said, yeah, we're trying to induce PTSD. So like the psychology for Democrats right now is fear. But the fact that they're feeling it themselves is saying something, right? There's one thing to be inducing fear on your voters to get them out as a way to it's not just persuasion. I think it's persuasion for the kind of voters who are on the fence, the double haters, the Nikki Haley voters, the independents, the latte dads. But for those like, base voters who maybe are just like, I think she's got it locked up. Like maybe it's a get out the vote mechanism for them. And I actually think her team though truly feels it and fears that future and sees it possibly happening in 11 days. And Trump, like I wrote about this last week, but he's in a really good mood. And he just has been. And maybe he's overreading the early voting figures, like you said, in Nevada, where Republicans are coming out in rural counties and even urban counties. You know, you got John Ralston at the Nevada Independent. He's kind of like the election political guru, saying this is a shocking like turnabout. We've never seen this before. That, you know, the Reid machine, the Harry Reid machine was supposed to get Democrats out early. That's how we did it. We banked, you know, a third of our voters before election day. But, you know, Democrats now have a quarter of their voters out and Republicans have a ton of voters out. And he thinks that the no tax on tips and the fact that Trump put that out there first may have been like may have been a way to sort of like draw a wedge in the you know, the hospitality unions out there, the culinary union, you know, that really controls like the Vegas area. So Steve, I'm hearing the same thing, but again,
Let's
Democrats
let's
by
talk.
nature anxious, Republicans by nature bravado. They said we were going to get a red wave in 2022. It was a red trickle, but you know, it could be also a way to activate voters.
Let's talk the psychology of it because I think it's so interesting when you take this outside of green room theory and apply it to the complexities of the real world. And I want you to call me out if I say anything that is remotely imprecise or incorrect about
Mm-hmm.
what's going to come out of my mouth. I am not wrong, right, when I say that Donald Trump communicated as aggressively as he could that voting by mail was a fraudulent, bad thing to do that elected Democrats, correct?
Absolutely, it's correct.
Then one day, right, Trump stops saying it,
Yes,
and the party starts communicating to that voter base, which had been socialized, don't do this, to you got to do this. Do I understand that right?
absolutely. I mean, in Pennsylvania right now, some of the signs you'll see are swamp them with votes, make it too big to rig, vote early today. So, yeah, now he's saying if you don't vote early, they're going to steal it from me. It's an
Right.
extension of his they stole my election narrative from 2020. But, you know, my sources tell me that it was only a couple of weeks ago that Trump was truly persuaded that voting early was a good thing, like early October. He still didn't believe it. They had to push him. And you know, just like a year ago, he was still telling people he thought it was rigged and fraudulent. So whatever the Republicans have done is incredible. Now, I know I always go back to my own family. I use them as my focus group, but I know my father is a Republican, and he went out to early vote. My brother is a Republican. He went out to early vote. At the same time, my mom, who is a swing voter, went out to early vote, and she's leaning towards Harris and brought up my grandmother, who is going to vote for Harris. So, like, they're in North Carolina. Early voting has always been a thing in North Carolina, but Republicans never really did it. They always were election day voters. But I think people are just like, why wouldn't we early vote now? They've made it so much easier. I mean, but again, in Pennsylvania, early voting is down across the board, but it was like 3-1 Democrats from Democrats to Republicans in terms of early vote mail-in ballot requests. Now it's 2-1. So, you know, Republicans have made gains in registrations in Pennsylvania. They're still not at the same level as Democrats, but there's something to be seen in these numbers. Like the trend lines are looking good and the momentum, it's looking good for Republicans. On election night, you got to make sure you hold on to that. It could be, you know, it could be that Democrats end up surging in the end, but and a lot of women have come out to vote. That's another thing. There's been more women have come out to vote than men, so that's also a good indicator for the Democrats. But I think they don't ever feel comfortable unless they are surging. And like I mentioned, I also talked to Trump's pollster John McLaughlin, who showed me his figures. He made them public. They showed Trump winning within the margin of error, like by a point in Pennsylvania, right? And I'm like, why do you say this is a victory? To me, you have a 49% chance of losing. And he's like, you just don't understand. We're not ever used to being up. Our psychology, even within the campaign, is that we're down. He said, something like this day in 2016, Real Clear Politics had Hillary at 48% and Trump at 41. So they're not used to feeling as if they've got a shot. And so they may be overcompensating for that. But I think it's partially the overcompensation from the numbers that show them at parity and this belief that there is momentum just based on the early voting numbers.
Well, I think one interesting facet of it is that you have to really dig into the psychology of it. If I was sitting in the campaign, I'd be really curious to know, you know, all of a sudden, and we say if you're on the Harris campaign, if I was on the Harris campaign, that the campaign's position is he's a fascist, which I would agree with, and that he is atop a cult of personality, which I agree with. So if that's true, the cult of personality is going to do what the leader tells it to do. So if the leader and all the propaganda vessels say, do this, people in that cult of personality, if it's real, are going to respond. They're going to follow the order. So we're going to see somewhere north of 162 million votes. The side that is going to be responsive to the order is definitely the MAGA side. The liberty loving side is going to be a little bit more freewheeling. And so we're going to see if that balances out on election day. But if you look at this through the prism of past is prologue, or that there's a trend line and that you can make certain deductions because the next election is always a bit prefaced and foreshadowed by the last one, then it's a really ominous thing. I want to ask you too about like this other kind of element of psychology, which I think is so interesting in the formation of the electorate, which is, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that Democrats, in order to be incited, to be instigated, to take action, have to be approached from the prism of something bad is going to happen.
Fear.
That fear. And on the Republican side, right, what the stimulant is, right, the inducement to join is winning.
Yeah. Being on the winning team. That appears to be the psychology of the teams, right? At the same time, I think they are both using, well, more so the Democrats and the Republicans. They're both trying to use scare tactics. Trump is leaning into immigration, something he leaned into in 2016, crime, the idea that we're being invaded. But yeah, there is something I think for Republicans, especially these low propensity voters, that maybe they want to go out and say that they voted for their cult leader, right? As you said, they want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. The question is, and what we hear from people like David Plouffe on Harris's side is, oh, these are all, first time voters, low propensity voters. When you're doing your models, how much are you accounting for the fact that a lot of these guys have never voted before? Like these like incels in their basement, as they've been referred to by the Harris team. Sure, like they've never voted before. They don't vote in 2022 when Trump's not on the ballot, right? It's all about Trump. But if Trump is really a driver of votes for these specific people that don't vote regularly, then like it's really hard to know what's going to happen. It maybe even cancels out the fact that the Democrats have a much better get out the vote operation. Republicans left it to Elon Musk and Charlie Kirk, who are in way over their head. Their canvassers are a mess. Some of them are actually like doing fraudulent door knocks, just trying to grift. And it's like the Republican National Committee is no longer a ground operation, fundraising operation. It's really become an election integrity unit, or, stop the steal unit. A bunch of lawyers are in there. Those are the people that are focusing on trying to like create lawfare on the election. Because no matter what happens, unless Trump sweeps, he's gonna, he's going to claim that, he won. And even if Harris sweeps, he'll still claim he wins. So he's got to be ready for that. And he also believes that he's going to win. Like he has said to Michael Watley and the RNC and all these people, like, I'm going to win this. And the only way I will lose this is if you fail me, if they steal it from me. This is it. So he's fired his warning shots already. Everybody knows that. So yeah, I mean, listen, is Trump enough of a get out the vote mechanism himself? Like between smartphones and the cult of personality, does that match a strong operation, a strong actual ground game of canvassers out there getting people out that the Democrats have? It's hard to say, but like I can tell you this, Harris is not a cult leader. She doesn't have 100% name ID. A lot of people say they don't really know anything about her. What more can you possibly know about Donald Trump? So it's really that is the X factor on election day. At the same time, like all of these, a bunch of battleground state experts that I spoke to this past weekend said, you know, Democrats are registering independents like at very high levels, and even in Nevada, where their alarm bells have been ringing, and it's hard to say whether these independents are just like disguised Democrats, because in 2020 Nevada started auto registering voters. It's the same thing in North Carolina. When you go to get a license, register your car, you're automatically registered as a voter. Or there's just like there's just like a thing you tick off, and if you don't pick a party, you're automatically registered as a nonpartisan independent. So like these, and they've come out. 100,000 of them have already come out. These independents. So what is motivating them to come out? Maybe it is the no tax on tips, and they heard it first from Trump. Or maybe they're Democrats. So I think in a lot of these states, there's been a big independent turnout. The psychology of it all is hard to say, because like women are also super motivated at the same time. Like they may be more motivated than the incels, and it might not be about Harris, but about their own rights. So
We're going to talk about the incels. I want to, for everybody who is watching this, David Plouffe, who is directing the strategy at the Harris campaign, the Obama campaign strategist, his theory, if I understand it correctly, is Trump has a ceiling, that he will not get a vote total beyond a hard number. Meaning, right, similarly, if you fly an airplane, right, into a hard object, right, because of physics, two objects can't occupy the same
yeah,
space at the same time, it's going to explode, right? It's going to crash. So what Pluff is saying is don't listen to all the noise, don't listen to all the thunder. There's a number that he's going to have to reach, and he can't reach it. Is that about right? Is that
yeah. He's saying he can't get more than 48% essentially. But the Trump team at the same time counters, you know, we're getting more first time voters, we're getting these young men, we're getting a lot of people feeling more comfortable about talking about voting for Trump. You know, you have this unique situation where incumbents are losing elections across the globe because of inflationary pressure. And you have like a unique set of circumstances where the fundamentals of the campaign are sort of on Trump's side right now. So whether you like him or hate him, if you're really voting on the economy and on immigration, the two top issues that voters report are important to them, like the fundamentals of the race are on Trump's side. It's just like, and does that mean he can break his 48% ceiling? I don't know. But does that mean that like Harris will get to 49.5 or 50? Like they both could have a ceiling. And there could just be, you know, who knows how the people in Michigan are going to go out and vote, right? There's Jill Stein still on the ballot with the Democrats right now. They might end up voting for Jill Stein. Steve, I'd be curious to see what you think. Do you think that 48% is Trump's ceiling and he can't reach it?
well, so there's a theory of the case, right? And
Mm.
everybody has to have a theory of the case. If you watch a football game this weekend, as the game gets down to its end, and if it's a close one, coach calls the play, quarterback calls the play. That play is premised on a theory of the case, that we line up this way and this player moves in motion,
Mm.
then these other players will react to that and be somewhere that we can exploit and take advantage of. And so I think that I'm not sure that I agree with the premise on the theory of the case. You know, Chuck Yeager is the pilot who broke the sound barrier, World War II ace. And Chuck Yeager, when he broke the sound barrier, there was a real belief that it was a barrier in the sky that was like a wall, that when you hit the sound barrier, it would be like hitting a wall. and instead he flew through it.
Mm,
So I don't sleep soundly as somebody who has a real rooting interest here, um, with regard to that Trump can't break through that ceiling. In the same way that the other campaign that David was involved in, Obama's campaign 2012, the premise of the Romney campaign was that there was no way there could be more Black people that would vote for Barack Obama in the second term than voted for him in the first term. And in fact, there were more Black people who voted for him in the second term in the reelection than in the first one. So I just think at the end of the day, you have to take a shot. I think if you had somebody looking at this, the best person in the world, like if I could pick somebody, if my brother was running for president
mm,
and I had to look at him and say this listen to this guy, I would say listen to Bluff, right? As somebody who
mm.
ran a race against David, is how much respect I have
Yeah,
for him. But that doesn't make him inerrant. It's not etched in granite. It's a
right.
guess. And it's a very, very close race. And all of the intangibles that you talked about, is women. And one of the things that you're never hear talked about on a television show, a lot of these cable shows, is that, well, is that woman responding to the immigration message or is she responding to the abortion message?
Right.
What's the high card between those two? And so the answer to that tells me a lot about that early female vote and its kind of displacements out across the country where we're seeing it. I do think that the one thing that I find like really incredible about this race, which is I've never seen anything like it, is if you're working on a campaign. When I worked on campaigns,
Mm,
there was no tolerance or space for delusional people because you are involved in an effort that doesn't stop 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, and nobody wants to be with somebody who's telling them that the red chair is blue, that
mm.
the green grass is orange, or whatever the case may be. For so much of the year, the position of the party, the Biden White House, was so oppositional to what voters were saying, which was, we don't want this. We don't want this choice. We don't want him to run for reelection, right? The party's position is basically like, we don't agree with anything on MAGA, on anything, but they agreed on one thing, right? Which is that the choice was the choice, right? It was Biden versus Trump until all of a sudden that it isn't. Now, I remember Bush in '04 talking to a bunch of this. I think it was like this talk he gave us. I always, when I tell a story, I say it was the smartest piece of political advice that I ever heard anybody give. And the basis of it was essentially that there's nothing that any of you can do to mitigate my weaknesses. They will shine through because that's the nature of the process. And there's an accidental genius to the American process, which is that you are fully revealed for who you are by the fact that it never ends. It's not a European election, which you're so familiar with, that they say in Belgium or France, wherever, we're going to have an election, right? And we're going to have it in 90 days. And there's the
Yeah.
election and it goes back on. This process is interminable. It never, ever stops. Kamala Harris took a big shortcut in the process. And what the polling has been saying through all of these months is we want to know something. We want to know something more. I talk to my Democratic friends all the time. And when you raise the question of, well, the polling is saying they want to hear something more, people will get enraged at you. They'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? Like, she
They
wants
think that you're
something more.
sexist or racist for
Right.
saying that.
It's like, what are you like?
Right.
He's talking about people eating dogs. And you're like, settle down. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm good. Right? She had me at second one. I would vote for
Well,
someone
you're the
in a in
anti-Trump
a
voter.
in
Yeah.
a in a suspended animation tank, right? That being
You
said,
would have voted for Biden. Let's be
right?
serious.
There's a
Right.
lot of there's a lot of people right out there, though, that are saying we want to know something more elemental, something more philosophical that she just still hasn't touched if you go by the polls. And so, the question is there transference, right? Does Beyonce appear and influence someone in the country and say, oh shit, like there's Beyonce, right? Now I'm with Kamala Harris, right? Or is all of that a distraction as we come down this stretch where she's got to take it, she's got to seize it? And if that's the case, and I think it is, like, do people understand in the Democratic side, is there a shared kind of conviction about what she needs to say to close it out? If you went and you talked to 20 people on the campaign, would they all say the same thing about this is what we're talking about for the last 10 days of this?
I think you like hit it on the head in the sense that like the one thing that she has not done is actually give a vision for her presidency. And she also hasn't been able to show how it will be separate from Joe Biden's presidency. People want change. They've made that clear. When you get, 30, 70% of the country wants it wants change, is unhappy with the way things are, right? Then you need to offer that vision of change. And she hasn't done that. I think that the prior Democratic campaigns before them, even if they worked or didn't work, they still had like an action, a movement, a momentum, a progression. Like, I'm with her. We're going to break the glass ceiling together. Yes, we can. We're going to nominate the first Black, president. Joy, not really sure. That's kind of like a tepid feeling, but it's not like moving forward. It doesn't push you anywhere. It's like, just be happy with the way things are. No, tell me how they're going to change. How many people aren't happy with the way things are? If you can answer that question, or you can fix that problem, then you win. You're the product I'm going to buy. But like, if your product doesn't fix my problem, then I'm not going to buy you. You're just on the shelf. And Trump says, I'll fix your problems. We'll go back to the way things were when maybe you actually did feel a little better. Maybe you didn't like me, but I made it a little bit better. When this other product is just not offering me, it's saying a lot of things that are, it cures a headache, it cures this, it cures that. But like, no, what I've got right now is a stomach ache. And you're not saying that you can fix a stomach ache. You know what I mean? So I just don't know exactly I don't think she's offered the vision. What is she going to do to fix the problem that Americans have? And how is she moving forward? Like, they're not happy with the state they're in. And and I just don't even really like the messaging out of her campaign. What do you think? Do you think that Joy is enough? And now they've kind of like gotten to like fuck Joy. That's over with in their final weeks because they've got to go dark to motivate their voters to kind of scare them into the polls. And I would be nervous too. I would be. 3.5 months is not a long time, as you said, to run for president. It's a snap election, which is a positive or negative. But like, the more she's out there, her favorabilities are dropping. Maybe it's the ads, the transgender ads. I mean, those have been really powerful, but because they not only like create the impression that she's a liberal, but they also seem to suggest that she would waste taxpayer money, right? And it hits at immigration, crime, the otherness, all of that, the worst like xenophobia of Americans. But also the View, like that comment that she said, what would you do different than Biden? Not a thing that comes to mind. Like the fact that that was such a powerful message, which alerted me to, saying like, this destroys the premise of her case that I'm changed. I think that's a really powerful thing too. And they've never really been able to recover from it. They've never found the right answer to that question. I'm different. I'm a different generation. I'm this. Who cares? Insult Biden. It doesn't matter. Do you guys want to win this? Do you want to fight? Like, get your fucking knuckles out. And I know it's not like proper protocol, but if there's anything that Americans have shown us time after time, is they're really tired of politicians. Don't be the politician out there. Sound a little different, be a little edgy. But like every time she's out there, even that CNN town hall, it's like, just get to the point. And like, even asked about grief. I mean, that's a really tough question. Her mother just died, but like, you can like talk about it like a normal person does. You don't have to think that hard about talking about grief. It's like she's going through her Rolodex of things that they prepped her with, the lines, and they probably didn't prep her on grief. And it's just, I might be being too hard on her, and I think everybody, even Democrats, are feeling that way too because of like the anxiety. Like she's the one who's supposed to save us all from this, from Trump,
So,
right? And if she's the savior, then you have to be perfect. And again, and back to Pluff, like Pluff is obviously brilliant and amazing, but like Pluff didn't make Obama. Obama made Obama. He is a once in a generation candidate. He is like slick. He is smart. He is like only Obama could really pull
right.
off that first black president thing. And she didn't have to go through a primary. She was kind of known as like she's an okay politician. Everyone thought she was amazing because of the rollout. But the more she's out there and the more she's being hit, she doesn't know how to respond. And so, not to like dump on her when I could go on for days about Trump and all of his problems, but we know what Trump is, and you know what
So,
you're getting.
so So this is the conversation right now, right? This is the conversation that I think Democrats are having, right? It is
Yeah.
not a measuring the drapes conversation. It's not
Mm-hmm.
optimistic, right? So I'm imagining a scenario, right? I'm gonna kind of role
Oh,
play this out.
by the way, Steve, just to preface this for the listeners, all of my comments have nothing to do with how she will be as a president. I'm just talking about how she will sell the
Right.
presidency to Americans. She might be a fabulous leader, president, etc., but you don't get there until you sell yourself. And I just don't think she's
No,
sold herself yet.
no question about it. And I'm just listening to you. And I just want to say to everybody, because we live in a time where there's a lot of sensitivity about hearing any news that conflicts with your worldview, that this is precise. This is accurate, right? This is, Tara just tonally is very much on the line with where Democrats are. She's reporting that in a way that I find very real, very tangible, because I'm having conversations with actual people that are very, very close, on the line to what we're talking about here. So I want to kind of set the stage and kind of role play this forward. Imagine that we're sitting around a table. It's at the Capitol. You got a bunch of staffers, Senate staffers, House staffers, White House staffers. Everybody's nervous. You're sitting in there. There's 50 people in the room, right? Everyone is bickering, whining. Somebody walks in there, right, and says, "Shut the fuck up, right? Stop, stop. It's an even race. She could
Mm.
win. She could lose. Who knows, right? What are we going to do? Who is the person that Kamala Harris is going to look to, that Barack Obama is going to look to, that the core inside who has the most trust accumulated in this person knows what they're doing, we're going to listen to them. Who's that person or
I would
people?
say Pluff. I mean, you were
Okay.
right. It's Pluff. He,
Pluff.
wouldn't you say? That
Right. I, I
seems
mean,
to
I,
me
I
like
think I think
maybe
David.
Axelrod. I mean, Axelrod still gets a lot of deference. He's seen as someone who sort of throws into the tent, but like, because he has a media job, he's got two podcasts. But like, I think when it comes to what are we going to do for our closing out argument, they look at the last people who won the election. And with all due respect to the Biden team, it was, it's Obama's team that people really, really look up to, don't you think?
Do they? I do. Do they have that settled? Do they know what they're going to close on?
The closing is the fascist stuff. It's dark, contrast. It's existential threat to democracy. Someone from Blueprint Polls, do you know them? They Reid Hoffman's group. He's funding it. He sent me some of the polling and messaging, and they found that this kind of threat to democracy language, the danger, the chaos around Trump, that it polls really well with independents and the people on the margins more so than the economy, immigration, even reproductive rights. I don't know if that's true, but he said by 1.8 points that polls better than the rest of the topics when trying to reach independence. So that's what you're going to hear. I mean, the it's motivation by fear, activation by fear of Trump. And so yeah, that's what they're leaning into. What have you heard something different?
Well, no, I mean, but like, do you think that's congruent with like having Beyonce out there? Does Beyonce drive that message, or are we going to see a multi-city celebrity fest in the Hillary Clinton
Oh
style,
God, yeah, no,
right,
everyone is getting PTSD.
in the final days?
Yeah, if there's
Or
anyone
is
getting
it
PTSD and flashbacks, it's a lot of Hillary staffers to the fact that they did this multi-city tour, not in the battleground states with big celebrities. I mean, some of these are in the battleground states. I think Bruce Springsteen was in Georgia last week. But yeah, that they might be
versus
going too
Bruce?
bold. They're doing their grand finale and it's their encore, and it's just, yeah, Bruce is Bruce. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Trump's doing the same thing. They're indulging in their egos right now. He's going to Madison Square Garden. He was at Coachella. They're trying to prove that they're a movement, right? That they can go into unfriendly territory, and Trump wants to be the Obama of the right. Let's be serious, right? And I think for her, there maybe it's the media markets outside of Houston that she's looking at, but I don't know. I would keep my head down and just grind it out. But then again, like I'm not Pluff. I'm not a political strategist. I just report on what they're doing.
Does
You would know.
does
I mean, you've been on the other end of it.
does the campaign have a plan to deal with his Madison Square Garden rally since they're closing out on fascism? Is that are they going to meet them at that spot, given that that's the spot where the German American Bund put
Yeah.
20,000 Nazis into the rally in 1939? Any talk on the campaigns about that at all? Like that's a big moment.
I know James Carville has talked a lot about that. I think you would know this better than me, but I think that it might be a hard comparison to make just because it's a difficult, like, some messages are just easier than others, right? You can get your surrogates out there on cable saying that, but like, how do you put that in an ad? Like Trump, Nazis, Madison Square Garden, you know, maybe you can do that, but you only have a week left. So do you want to use that
Right.
as your final argument? It might just be like, is that a weird historical reference that might be related or not? Whereas like we know that they are, or would you rather run the tape of General Kelly calling him, but maybe you put it all in one and like, and here he is in the same place that, the Nazis convened. You're cutting new ads. You've got a week. I'm guessing these ads have been tested and this is the final argument that they want. It does seem kind of like, I guess you save your best for last, right? And this is what they're going with, and it makes sense because if you're trying to win over people like those Republicans, soft Republican swing voters like my mom, I mean that was the thing that she just kept saying over and over again. Like she's a double hater. I don't really like either of these people, but January 6th, like, oh, what a nightmare. I don't want that to happen again. Like, just we're just right around the corner from another inaugurate. We're just around the corner from January 6th. It's just reminding people of the chaos that could come at any time, the civil unrest. I think it's interesting too that Trump's team isn't really using the assassination attempts in their ads either. I think it might suggest to them from their polling that like actually people don't like civil unrest in either direction. Like images of him being shot at create the impression that by electing him there will be
Mhm.
more chaos as well. It supports
I think that's
Harris's
astute.
argument. Uh,
Let me let me let me go in another direction, imagining a scenario where she's going to win. And let's say I'm like at around 11:45 p.m., pretty confident trajectory wise, that she's got it. Most people who've done this believe she's got it. The Kornackis of the world, Harry Enton on CNN, all the math prodigies. We're gonna have, and let me just back up and just say that, again, I placed a phone call for John McCain to Barack Obama, right, in the
oh
in the
wow.
process of the concession phone call, and on that. So Trump, let's say, goes out and says, even though he's losing or lost, that he's winning and is going to win. Will Fox call the race?
Mm. Oh, poor Chris Starwalt. He gave me my first job, the Washington Examiner. He plucked me out of the green room at what happened to him was so terrible. They fired him for calling it in Arizona. I think they have to. I think deep down, well, based on my reporting too, Murdoch is so fucking done with Trump. He's really done with him. Like, sure, he wanted to influence him by getting him to pick Doug Burgum to put an adult in the room rather than JD Vance. But I think Fox would probably be more than happy to like call it early. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's like way. I think the journalists are going to be nervous. Look what happened last time. Wouldn't you be? I mean, if you were thinking like you might get fired for it.
What about Elon Musk in Twitter? How do
Oh my
you
gosh, it's a
have you
perfect.
guys talked about that at Puck? What does anyone think that that's going to look like when? I mean, I think that whatever we associate X or Twitter with regarding misinformation, right? It like hasn't really gotten going yet with regard to what's coming, but that's going to be a big
Yeah.
factor in the 24 to 48 hours as a crisis builds.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. And something probably an assignment editor should be on for every single net. Every network should be covering this right now because, yeah, what are his plans? Maybe he doesn't even know, but of course he's going to be promoting any sort of data that suggests that Trump is winning, even if it's, it changes throughout the night. And I've got to assume that. And if we don't have the results, how long is he going to be pushing information that suggests that votes are being stolen here? I mean, he's intimately involved in the process by way of supporting these super PACs that are get out the vote super PACs, right? That are kind of like attached to the RNC, part of the election integrity unit. He's going to have information and intel, and he's going to want to sow disinformation and distrust in the process. And we know that at least 47 to 48% of people are going to vote for Trump. So they're going to be looking at this and wondering if their vote counted or mattered. And where they get their media is going to likely highlight in their algorithm, information that shows that they shouldn't trust the results. I was just thinking too about TikTok. You've got Jeff Yass, who's got a lot of money on the line with TikTok. It's been banned, right? It's coming before the Supreme Court, federal. I think there's a case before the Supreme Court. Trump has said he would support TikTok. Yass is a donor to Trump. It's a Chinese health company. What are they going to do? I mean, if there's anything about social media, it's like counterculture and the fringes that tend to be amplified on these social media outlets. So like I could see them really amplifying the noise and the information that's not trusted. Now, like Meta has learned its lesson, right? So like this interaction that we're having right now probably won't be posted. If you posted it on Meta on a Instagram or Facebook, it probably won't populate high. The algorithm will depress it. But if we but political content does really well on TikTok. It does really well on Twitter. And I think there's a reason for it. And I could see Musk just letting the conspiracy theories go wild. Like Twitter could become like the back pages of Reddit, which I think is like completely unregulated, right? Which could lead to God knows what. I don't want to be apocalyptic, but in a lot of ways, a close race is a terrifying thing
Yeah.
because like without having a clear answer, it just like we distrust, it creates conspiracies. I mean, people that I've spoken to inside of the RNC who are like adjacent to the election integrity unit say there are sane people there, like Watley, who are prepared, who is the RNC co-chair, who are prepared for some of the other lawyers that are part of this team, like Christina Bobb, who was indicted in the attempt to steal the race in Arizona, Kurt Olson, another election denier, who are prepared to say that machines are changing votes, right? It's like they're willing to redo the playbook all over again. And it's and what are they supposed to do? And they've already shot off emails to they've been sending letters to Maricopa County judges who are like, back off, back off. It's crazy. They're laying the groundwork. It's going to be lawfare.
let me,
There has to be a decisive winner, I think,
if
for that
I,
not to happen.
if I was on the campaign, um, sometime this week, presuming this has not been done yet, you can tell me that this has been done and it'll make me feel better because it would be late to be having the first conversation about it. But I would say something like, we have to have a meeting this week. And I don't like to have the meetings, right? So I don't want to
Yeah.
have the meeting. If I say we got to have a meeting, we got to have a meeting. And what I would want to say in the meeting is, let's imagine we're winning.
Mhm.
We're winning. In any normal election year, right? We would wait for the phone call now. We would give some space. There might even be some contact between the campaigns. David would be cautious in this moment, responsible, restrained, and respectful, as would Stephanie Cutter, right? They're going to be like, wait, not yet, not
Mm.
yet. So Trump goes out, makes his first allegation. They're stealing the election. I won, yada, 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 whips everybody up. The Harris Walz campaign is going to do what? Do you think they've had this meeting yet? Is Kamala Harris going to walk out? Is the general counsel of the campaign going to walk out? The moment that that happens, right, there's a game, a deadly one, I suspect, afoot. Do they have this planned out?
That's a good question. I don't know that, but we know just from Pennsylvania and the way that the voting works there, you're probably not going to get a decisive vote for 4.5 days, right? They don't count all their votes, and Pennsylvania has come down to a point. So unless it's a sweep in all the rest of the states, and we end up back where we were in the last two elections, it's probably going to come down to Pennsylvania, right? Um, and so Trump will come out and say he won. I fully expect that, even before the votes are counted, unless for some reason it's. But I don't know. Even if it was blatantly obvious that he lost, I think he would still say he won. Um, Maybe they do have, Walz and Harris come out and say, like, right now we haven't been able to count all the votes. If it's close, if it really looks like she's down, I think she concedes, right? I mean, how could she not do the responsible thing? But if it's that close, she's like, I want, everyone to, wait, let's have some patience to get through the votes. We're very optimistic, but, there are a number of absentee ballots and we still need to count the votes in these crucial states. So please, like, have some caution and just, and, and I think I would hope that they showed some responsibility in terms of how they handle this. I think they would, especially if they're trying to show contrast with Trump, but they should have a plan for this. I don't know it, Steve. I wish I had the answer, but I don't know what the plan
And
is.
and
Did you know what you were going to do ahead of time?
absolutely,
You did.
yeah, 100%. All
Have you
all
heard what they're going to do?
No, I don't know. I mean, obviously there won't be a concession phone call, right?
Yeah, I don't
So
know.
so it's going to be a misinformation race, where the chances of all the violence, all the terrible things go up if it's not contained, right? It's going to be like a fire, like a
Yeah,
big, giant California style inferno fire.
which is essentially lit up by we'll start with a small Truth Social tweet in the back of the
Right,
woods,
right,
amplified by all of the networks, all of his surrogates, Elon Musk amplifying. Even go to Truth Social. Maybe he goes on Twitter. Maybe he live streams it in an interview with Elon Musk. Um, and then the algorithms that go crazy.
I mean, like I would like to a boost. I mean, if I was running the campaign, I would go see the White House chief of staff and I'd say, why doesn't the president fire Merrick Garland this week? And say that he doesn't have confidence in him to oversee the crisis that will occur in the country if a fascist movement tries to claim victory after losing an election. And I think Democrat base voters would like it. I don't think independents would be offended. Republicans would be enraged, which would help make the race more about them than Harris, which is kind of the alchemy that you need at the end.
Mm.
On all of those things. But no, I do. Like I would be sitting around right now. I mean, obviously there's this part of the rhythm of a campaign when there's 250 days left, right? There's a lot more work to do when there's 11 days left, right? Because so much of this is in planning, right? You have now until next Thursday at about 4 o'clock Eastern time to make your last traffic changes, to get your last ads out, to get the points behind them for the final weekend. So there's not a lot more to do on the campaign per se, because the conventions are behind you, the debates are behind you,
Mm.
everything's behind you. You have 20
So
November.
it's interesting you said that. So really, what you're saying is, whatever her vision is, whoever she is, whether you want to have a beer with her or not, it's too late to make that argument to voters at this point. And so really what they are doing is the right thing by highlighting the Republicans, by highlighting the unpredictability of Trump, the fascism, the danger, the chaos. So they are doing the right thing in your opinion.
I think whomever this race is about is going to lose. And so in the end, right, it's
Mm,
not going to be determined by the TV advertising, though his is a lot better than hers,
mm.
right, in terms of the power of the message and its resonance, but all of it together, right,
Why
as
is
you
his
come
so much
down.
better than hers? I don't understand that. They have so much footage
Um,
of him.
I don't we've had a 9-year conversation, right, where what is Trump is still unsettled, right?
Mm,
Is he a fascist, Madam Vice President? We're 13 days from the election.
mm,
Right? I can go on for hours about this, right? The answer to the question, historically, tangibly,
mm,
ideologically, is yes, he is.
mm.
But he has been, and it's not hyperbole. But should the Democrats be talking about the economy? Does the country see Joe Biden as FDR? Is Bidenomics something that the middle class was excited by? Right. So all of this goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, which is we live in this era where there is a belligerence on the part of the campaigns towards the voters that really wasn't present, I think, in either party when I was doing this, right? In my kind of stretch, because there was a recognition that no reason to antagonize the voter, right? They're trying to tell us something here. And just a lot of that doesn't seem to matter in the moment. In the end, here, she needs to prosecute the case. She has to give a closing
Mm,
argument. If he's a danger, then you have to communicate that he's a danger, right?
mm,
If he is a threat, right, then it's a different close than the Obama close in '08 against John McCain. So, right, what she says matters, but she's got to keep the race on him, right? That the great question at hand isn't about Kamala Harris. Great question at hand is about the country and Donald Trump, right? And
mm.
that wherever that ribbon is on that tug of war rope, it's got to be on her side of that line in order to be able to win.
So she's basically like, I'm a product. You might not like me, but that product is actually toxic and it is poison. And I'm warning you that you're about to buy poison and you can buy me on water, but that's poison next to you.
You have to
And you
talk
might be
about
like,
the
but you're like, but that's Mountain Dew and I like Mountain Dew.
yeah.
But you're like,
I
but
mean,
little do you
in
know,
the end, like Winston
this
Churchill
race
said
will come
two
down to
things,
Mountain Dew.
but in the end, like Winston Churchill said two things, right? He said, people get the government they deserve. And he was like, in the end, Americans always do the right thing after exhausting all the other possibilities. So, like, we're definitely in that moment, right? We're going to see from my perspective if he's right. I like intellectually, I don't have a great feeling, but faith wise in the country, that I'm still not across the line where I see Donald Trump getting reelected as a matter of faith. in who I think we are as a people, but there's a lot of us, right? There's 340 million,
Mm.
162 million people are voting. You know, when someone like Joy Behar goes out and says, and I no disrespect to her, but when she's like, I can't even imagine why someone should vote for Trump. I think that's a big problem. I think there's a lot of people around the
Yeah.
Democratic campaigns that have no capacity emotionally or intellectually to understand what it is about Trump that people find appealing, right? Why that
Yeah.
incel in the basement finally, right, is part of a community,
Well, he feels strength. He's
right?
a guy that has always
Exactly.
felt like he was a weak person in society, and he derived strength from Trump. I think a lot of men feel oppressed, which is a despite white privilege or whatever, they feel oppressed and they derive strength from Donald Trump. I love Trump supporters. They're in my family. I love them, and I can't. The things they say, they may not make any sense, but I understand where they're coming from emotionally and psychologically. So, a feeling of being left out. My father's an electrician. What is he? What he's a small business owner. Where is his place in the global world? He's being replaced by immigrants that are coming through. One day automation will do what he does.
Does he like it when he gets the lecture about his white privilege?
Oh, well, he's not a white person to him because he's Italian, and Italians weren't allowed to live in certain places when he grew up. So, that's another thing. People don't want to be called white sometimes when they know that they weren't really considered, they were never allowed to be a part of the WASP class either, right? So there's a whole weird psychology around it. And like, it would be an amazing thing to see if young women end up carrying the day on election day. They just come out in droves and say like, just like, fuck you, we're voting for
And
Kamala Harris.
it's
But
such a,
that's the antidote to it, right? Like,
it is, that is the serum to it, right? It's just a surge of women, uh,
mm-hmm.
who say no, who say no.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
the
everyone is a victim in their mind, right? And so like if you can activate that, how you can develop, like how whatever you represent gives that victim strength, then like I think you're going to win them over in some way. And and I do think that Kamala Harris is a powerful symbol for women. Like I even remember in the last election, like I'm trying to make a point of not voting when I'm covering an election. Sometimes I don't really cover it. Like last election, I didn't really cover it, so I was like, I can vote. I was doing Epstein work, but like I felt like a real pride when I saw her get to the point of vice president, and just like not. I was like, whoa, this is a big moment. Like I felt like a woman is in the White House. Like that was a big deal. It represents a lot for women, and I do think a lot of women feel victimized right now by the idea that they don't have control over their autonomy of their bodies, and they and that message is really strong. But there is a whole other segment of women who are past that phase of their life. Maybe they've already had children. It's not top of the list for them. They're worried about, someone like my mother, for example, who's like, you know what, I'm past that stage of my life. I'm 60. I've got to do this and that. It's like, as much as I care about that, I've got other issues. So, but I also think she's ultimately going to vote for Kamala Harris. I don't know. I want to understand the psychology of voters, but I don't think they can even really rank their positions as what's most important to them in their heads. I think it's just a feeling you have and who you like and who you relate to. Um, and who you think is going to give you more power in the world. And it's hard to say, like, and if you don't feel like you're going to derive any power from that person, maybe you won't go out and vote for them. I don't know.
well, that's a great place to leave it. I'll just conclude it by saying that this is the 60th quadrennial presidential election. We've done this as a country 60 times. Women have gotten to participate in the last 23 of them. And Black people, if you lived in an apartheid state in the South, the last 13. There's 340 million people that live in the country. There's only 700 million of us that have ever been in all of history, in all of human existence, which means half of us who have ever lived roughly are alive right now. And
Mhm.
about 162 million people, roughly about half of that are going to come out and vote in this election. And what you said, I think, is a perfect way to end it because nobody really knows in what mix voters will turn out, that there's a small geography that produces the overwhelming amount of people that go on television and opine about who's going to do what and where thousands of miles from them.
Mhm.
But the fact is, we just don't know. And so, in this final week, as you come down, I think a couple of things you said are just really true. That there's a real sense in the electorate that her vision is not yet clear. There's a lot of anxiety and worry among Democrats. There's a real recognition that there is a surge towards Trump of mail vote that will cut into Black and Hispanic numbers, that is material. And there is an unknown question around how America's women will respond to years of antagonism and the loss of a right for the first time in history granted by the court, now stripped away directly because of Donald Trump, who's made clear this is his achievement. So I have in all of my, I'm 54 now, right? So, going back to 1992, when I was 22 and coming out of college, this is the one that is the closest and hardest to
Mhm.
really tell where it is this close to the end.
If you had to make a prediction today, though, who do you think wins?
I say this, I'm not trying to dodge it. Like my intuition, my instinct, my feeling is not good, right? It's
Yeah.
he wins. My faith, which is as I kind of get older and which is tough for me, kind of an acceptance, a
Mm.
letting go, a serenity almost. I have a deep, deep faith in the country. Um, Not as a jingo, not as a nationalist, but in the country, the idea of it, the people in it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe the American people are going to elect this guy president again. So if you make me pick, she wins. But I'm literally taking a leap of faith, and I'm taking it with a strong voice in my head telling me the parachute's not going to open when I jump out of the door of the plane. So there you have it.
I I I don't know, Steve. Like I actually think he's gonna win. And my sense is like he could fuck it up because so many of the fundamentals of the rates are on his side. But I also just and maybe it's because people are unafraid to say that they're gonna support Trump now. Like maybe the stigma around Trump is gone, but I just feel there's a more intensity for him. I think there was a lot of intensity for her when she first came out, but you're seeing her favorables starting to drop. And I don't know what to make of that. I mean, why do you think her favorables are dropping now? The more she's out there and the more people are getting to know her, her numbers go down.
When you're aiming at a target, they teach you how to shoot a rifle, right? There's this saying, aim small, miss small,
Mm,
right? So you have to be able to evaluate what elevation you need to climb to clear the mountain, or you're going to fly into it. I
mhm,
don't know a better way to explain it. If you were talking to somebody associated with the space program, they would tell you that the rocket has to hit 17,000 miles an hour for it to break Earth's orbit and get into
mm,
space. If it doesn't, it'll bounce off and it'll burn up and everyone will die. When you saw the polling, right, develop in August and September, when the electors saying we want more. That was a signal that they wanted more. And so, like, if she does not win, I've been able to for some time, I feel like be able to articulate why not. Right. I'll be
Yeah.
able to diagnose it. So I know why it wouldn't be the things that she didn't do that she had to do to win. And the question is, did she do enough? Because she did a lot to get over the line and it's be really close. I think that like there has not been an articulation, right, of a vision about where she wants to lead. And tough as it may be, tough as it may be personally, is you're sitting around the table in a campaign, surely to God, somebody sat there and had a serious discussion that we're not going to lose this race to Donald Trump because we're afraid of offending Joe Biden's ego about answering the question on what we would do differently, because we need to not only say something that we would do differently, probably need to communicate that we would do a bunch of things differently.
And call out maybe some things you could have done. What's wrong with saying I didn't do this right?
Yeah, I don't
Can you
know,
do that?
right? And
Does
so,
that show weakness?
well, the concept of accepting accountability, it's my fault in meaning it. Afghanistan, for example, is reported, right, as the
Mm.
catastrophic withdrawal in every news organization in the country, right, from Fox News to the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal as an objective descriptor.
You don't even need those papers. Just look at the images. Yeah.
So you obviously say, right, and Republicans, right, this was an important question, right? And anytime when you look at one of these questions, right, that's in the end, right, is it disqualifying, right? You could lose the election issue. There's always the oppositional, right? There's always the opposite version of it in the other party, right? So, during the height of the Iraq War, right, 2008, Barack Obama comes on the scene as an Iraq War opponent. But for years afterward, right, the question that would be asked, and this played a role in helping make Trump the nominee, was knowing what we know now, would we have invaded Iraq again? Is the world safer? And so all the crazy things that Trump said in 2016, none of them were crazier than Jeb Bush saying, yeah, we would have invaded Iraq again,
Right.
right? So you had an entire party yoked to a position that the entire country knew was wrong. And it wasn't like they wanted to hear them renounce the Iraq war. They wanted to hear that candidate commonsensically agree with the proposition that they knew to be true, which was, of course not, we wouldn't fucking do that again. It was a disaster, right? That was the question. And so when Jeb Bush says it, politician.
Right.
Now, Trump goes, of course not. So the version of that question for Democrats, right, that you could see coming from a mile away was, okay, what are you going to do differently than Biden?
The other hard one is how long did you know that Biden couldn't run or really be president? And that's just like plain as day to any human being. You really have to be a partisan to be able to look past that.
Yeah,
And that's that's
yeah.
that's really what it comes down to. Or you have to like really hate Trump. That's a hard one.
It's a it's a bigger issue with real people in the country than is covered,
Yeah.
in Washington, for sure.
Because it looks like
Big
a scandal. It frankly looks like a scandal.
people. Well, what it does, right? If you say that Biden was fine and the border is secure, in the end, you help make Trump the most prolific liar in American history into the honest candidate in the race. So when you're sitting
Exactly.
around strategically and you're kind of, how the fuck did that happen?
Right.
That's how it happened, right? So when you look at this from a political perspective of, hey, why did we lose? Well, the most dishonest guy that's ever been, a guy who's making up lies about Haitians eating cats and dogs, somehow, because of your dishonesty, was able to encircle us, neutralize the issue, and there you go, right? So,
A
politics.
top issue. I mean, did you see Anderson Cooper in the town hall with her when he was like, well, why didn't you just do the Title IX executive order again? what took so long? Why not do it at the same time? I mean, that was a very incisive question, but it was pretty basic. Right. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that you could have fixed the problem all along. And it's a hard one. I mean, maybe just take accountability. We thought we could fix it with Congress. We should have done it this way. But is weakness now something you can't do in Trump's era of never say sorry, this is, or never be accountable to anything? You're right. I mean, these are the things that we're going to look back on. And I think a lot of the blame is going to be on Joe Biden. If they lose, I think people are going to be furious with Joe Biden.
It's going to be a brutal thing for Joe Biden, for the people around him. It will shatter his legacy, and it will, it will have a profound impact on the media business, right? Which is, a subject for another day, in that, you're in a news organization that is disrupting it. The media business is going to be further deeply disrupted by a Trump win. There's going to be a lot of soul searching about the total disconnect and how he was covered over the last 9 years. But for sure, that being said,
on that happy note,
I do want to say at this moment, you heard, it's close. For those of you who are out there, you got to be involved. Politics is a part of citizenship. Be a good citizen. Do something. Get involved. Don't whine. Don't complain. Get in the fight. And with that, we'll leave it there. This is The Warning. Thank you, Tara Palmeri. Thank you so much for taking time this late Friday afternoon from the East Coast. Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.